Bitcoin is often hailed as the future of money, a revolutionary way to store value and transfer wealth without the need for middlemen or banks. But what if I told you that the Lightning Network, often seen as Bitcoin's answer to fast, cheap payments, is not Bitcoin? In fact, it operates under a very different set of rules and trade-offs that can affect your security and the true decentralization that Bitcoin stands for. Let's dive deep into why Lightning is not Bitcoin and why you should be cautious when using it. Bitcoin at its core is about decentralization, transparency, and security. Every transaction is verified by miners through a process called proof of work, and it's recorded on a public ledger, the blockchain, for the world to see. But here's the thing with the Lightning Network. Lightning operates outside of Bitcoin's main blockchain. It's designed as a second layer, a system that runs on top of Bitcoin, enabling fast and cheap transactions. But at what cost? First off, Lightning is centralized. Unlike Bitcoin, where thousands of miners and nodes maintain the security and transparency of the network, Lightning relies on a small set of nodes that control much of the network's traffic. These nodes essentially act as middlemen, creating centralized points of failure. In a decentralized world, the last thing we want is a system where a few powerful nodes can control the flow of transactions. Now, let's talk about transparency. One of Bitcoin's most valuable features is that anyone can verify any transaction on the blockchain. It's like having a public ledger where every single transaction is recorded forever. But with Lightning, transactions aren't verifiable on the blockchain. When you send Bitcoin over Lightning, those transactions happen off-chain, meaning they don't get recorded in the same way that Bitcoin transactions do. You lose that layer of accountability, and suddenly the transparency that Bitcoin promises is gone. In a world where transparency is key, that's a red flag. What about security? Bitcoin's security comes from its proof of work mechanism. This is what keeps Bitcoin decentralized and virtually unhackable. It requires significant computational power to secure the network. But Lightning doesn't use proof of work. Instead, it relies on a system of smart contracts and multi-signature wallets. And while that may sound secure, it's simply not at the level of Bitcoin. Lightning lacks the robust security that comes from proof of work, and that should give anyone pause. Let's break this down even further. On the Lightning Network, the transactions you make aren't really Bitcoin to Bitcoin. It's more like an IOU, a promise that gets settled only when you close out the payment channel. So, while it may feel like you're using Bitcoin, the reality is that these transactions are happening off-chain, and it's only when you exit the Lightning Network that the real Bitcoin transaction occurs. Think about that. You're not really exchanging Bitcoin the way you are on the main network, and that's a crucial difference. Lightning transactions aren't true Bitcoin transactions, and now we come to scalability. The promise of Lightning is that it can handle thousands of transactions off the blockchain, freeing up space and reducing costs. But here's the problem. Scalability comes at the cost of decentralization. If you want to scale something, you often have to sacrifice security, and in this case, decentralization. The more scalable Lightning becomes, the more centralized it gets, and the more centralized it gets, the further away it drifts from the core principles of Bitcoin. It's a trade-off, and in this case, it's one that undermines the very foundation of Bitcoin itself. And then there's the issue of exchanging from Lightning back to Bitcoin. It's easy to put your Bitcoin into the Lightning Network, so easy that it feels almost seamless. But the moment you want to take your Bitcoin out of Lightning and back into the main Bitcoin blockchain, things get complicated. It's not easy to convert back, and this creates a trap for users. It's like walking through a one-way door. Sure, getting in is easy, but getting out? That's where the real challenge lies, and that's where people can get stuck. To make matters worse, the very structure of the Lightning Network introduces risks that Bitcoin doesn't have. For example, on Lightning, both the sender and receiver need to be online for a transaction to happen. That's right, you need to be constantly connected to the network, and so does the person you're transacting with. If either one of you goes offline, the transaction can't be completed. This isn't the case with Bitcoin, where transactions can be sent and confirmed on the blockchain, regardless of whether the other party is online or not. But that's not all. There's also the issue of monitoring the blockchain for fraud. With Lightning, you need to constantly check to make sure that your counterpart hasn't tried to cheat the system by broadcasting an old transaction to the blockchain. If you're not paying attention, you could lose your funds, and that's why Lightning introduces the need for watchtowers third-party services that monitor the blockchain for you, but doesn't that just introduce another layer of complexity and trust into a system that's supposed to be trustless? Let's not forget the difficulty with backups. On Bitcoin, all you need is your 24-word seed phrase to restore your funds no matter what. But on Lightning, every time you open a new payment channel, you need to back it up. And even then, there's a risk that if your channel partner is uncooperative, you could lose funds. This makes managing Lightning much more complex than Bitcoin. So let's sum it up. The Lightning Network, while promising faster and cheaper transactions, is not Bitcoin. It's centralized, not secured by proof of work, not verifiable on the blockchain, and introduces risks that Bitcoin simply doesn't have. While it may offer convenience, it does so at the expense of decentralization and security, the very things that make Bitcoin so revolutionary, and if you're not careful, you could find yourself trapped in a system that doesn't uphold the same values. Now, you might wonder, are there any positives? Absolutely. The first is that transactions are faster and cheaper. Plus, Lightning offers a level of privacy and anonymity since transactions aren't recorded directly on the blockchain. So if you decide to use it, just make sure you're spending Bitcoin you're comfortable parting with, perhaps for smaller amounts like a few $100s. Oh, and if you're ready to take your Bitcoin game to the next level, check out the CryptoVagabonds Academy. We break down all the strategies you need to navigate crypto like a pro, whether you're just starting out or already deep in the game. We've got you covered. In the end, be cautious. Lightning may look like Bitcoin, but it's not, and understanding these differences can help you make smarter choices when navigating both systems. And remember, stay curious and stay hodling.